If one day you came home earlier than planned and found the person you trusted most your partner, your love doing something more cruel than you ever imagined, what would you do? Walk away in silence, or face a truth that could shatter your entire life? Ethan Cole, a billionaire, a man seemingly perfect in every way, comes home on an ordinary afternoon, but in a single moment, his world collapses. Inside the glass-walled mansion by Lake Tahoe, he finds his wife striking the face of a little girl, the daughter of their housekeeper. That moment isn't just a shock. It's the beginning of a chain of dark secrets buried for years. Secrets that will test everything he believes about love, morality, and redemption. Would you have the courage to face the darkness in the one you love and the one that lives inside yourself? Join me on this journey, a story of guilt, justice, and forgiveness. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you won't miss the emotional chapters to come. The sun was sinking behind the distant ridge above Lake Tahoe, the last streaks of light draping over the glass walls of the Cole family mansion like strands of golden silk. The air carried a faint mix of pine and cinnamon, the soothing scent the housekeeper always lit in the evenings. From a distance, the home looked like something out of a postcard polished steps, a perfectly trimmed garden, and the lake shimmering silver under the sunset. Inside, it was so still you could hear the clock ticking in the living room. Ethan Cole, 45, a renowned tech billionaire, had built this house with the precision of a perfectionist. The same precision that built his career, every detail calculated, clean, flawless. People admired him not just for his genius, but for his composure and elegance. The press called him the gentleman of Silicon Valley. Yet as his car rolled down the familiar road toward home, Ethan felt a weight pressing against his chest. He hadn't planned to come home early tonight. His business flight to New York had been canceled due to a storm, giving him something rare, a free evening, the perfect chance to surprise his wife. Isabella, the woman Ethan once believed to be his destiny, was 38 now. Beautiful, graceful, once a model, and now the face of several charities. Whenever she walked into a gala, her smile could light up the entire room. She was the image of kindness, elegance, and class. They were once called the perfect couple. At least, that's what everyone else thought. The car stopped at the gate. Ethan told the driver to take the night off and slowly walked up the stone path leading to the house. He wanted to savor the feeling of coming home, no meetings, no buzzing phone, no numbers swirling in his head. As the door opened, the faint aroma of baked pastries drifted through the air, the familiar handiwork of Maria, their Mexican housekeeper who had been with them nearly 3 years. She was gentle and quiet, her brown eyes always patient. Her 8-year-old daughter, Luna, often ran around the house, drawing pictures and gifting Ethan her innocent little artworks that covered the fridge door. Ethan had always felt a special warmth toward them, maybe because their simple, genuine presence reminded him of his childhood, before money made life cold. He hung his coat and loosened his tie. In the silence, the sound of his shoes against the stone floor echoed oddly loud. The last rays of daylight filtered through the wide glass panes, casting a soft golden glow over the cream-colored furniture. But something felt off. The house was quieter than usual, too quiet. No sound of Isabella's heels, no laughter, no little Luna's voice. Even the usual clatter of Maria cleaning was gone. Ethan walked through the living room. The long oak table was neatly set, a vase of white lilies at the center. Beside it stood a photo he and Isabella on their 10th anniversary night. Glasses raised, smiling at each other as if nothing in the world could shake them. He stopped, staring at it for a long time. Behind that perfect picture, what had he missed? Isabella had changed in recent years. Fame had made her colder, quicker to anger. She spoke to staff in a commanding, sometimes cruel tone, so sharp that Ethan would quietly retreat. He always told himself she was just tired, that things would calm down eventually. But tonight, in this heavy silence, that excuse felt terrifyingly thin. He stepped into the hallway, stopping beside the grand piano Isabella once loved to play. The lid had been closed for months, a fine layer of dust settling over it. On a nearby shelf, something pink caught his eye, a small plastic bracelet with beads spelling Luna, a little gift the girl had proudly shown him days earlier. Ethan bent down, picked it up, and smiled softly. She must have dropped it, he whispered. Then a sound, very faint, very distant. It sounded like crying. He froze. His heart quickened. The sound came from the far end of the hallway toward the kitchen. A child's sobs, mixed with another voice sharp, angry, trembling with rage. "Stop crying, I told you to shut up." A woman's voice. Familiar. Ethan went still. He listened again, and there was no mistake. It was Isabella's voice. This time he heard it all, the muffled sobs, then a sharp, stinging crack. Smack a slap. Clear as day. Ethan's fists clenched. His breath hitched. He didn't want to believe it, couldn't believe it. Step by step, he moved toward the kitchen. The warm yellow light spilled across the cold stone floor. He stopped at the doorway, half in shadow, half in light. Inside, Isabella stood tall, her face tight with fury, her hands still raised. Maria knelt on the floor, trembling, while Luna sobbed into her palms. Ethan didn't move, his whole body locked in place. In that moment, everything he believed in love, kindness, happiness shattered like glass. And he knew, after tonight, nothing in his life would ever be the same again. The sharp crack of the slap ripped through the kitchen, tearing apart the stillness that had filled the house. Ethan froze at the doorway, his hand gripping the wooden frame so tight his knuckles turned white. Before him unfolded a scene his mind refused to accept. The soft yellow light cast over Isabella's face the same woman the world praised as a symbol of grace and compassion. She stood there, breath quick and uneven, her raised hand still flushed red. On the floor, Maria knelt, trembling, shielding her daughter. Little Luna shrank back, tiny hands covering her face, sobbing soundlessly. For a moment, time stopped. The kitchen was bright yet cold. Every sob pierced the air like a blade. A wave of shock hit Ethan. He stepped inside, his voice breaking out hoarse, sharp, trembling. "Isabella, what the hell are you doing?" Both Maria and Luna flinched. Isabella spun around, her face frozen in surprise, eyes wide. She hadn't expected him home. "Ethan!" "When did you get back?" she stammered, then quickly regained her composure. "I was just teaching this child a lesson. She broke my daughter's toy." Ethan stood still, eyes fixed on the red handprint across Luna's cheek. His heartbeat pounded in his chest, heavy, furious. A toy. His voice was low, rough, shaking with restrained rage. "You hit an 8-year-old child over a toy." "Isabella, I didn't hit her," she snapped. "I was teaching her boundaries." Then, turning toward Maria, her voice dripped with disdain. "If you can't teach your child manners, I will." Maria burst into tears, her words tumbling out between gasps. "Please, Mom, please don't. Luna didn't mean to. She only touched the doll. I already apologized." Ethan shut his eyes. The air rang in his ears, 1,000 echoes at once. Isabella's words sliced through him, cold, hollow, heartless. He looked at his wife, the woman he once admired, the woman who made him believe kindness could coexist with success, and realized he no longer recognized her. "Boundaries," he whispered. "What boundary allows you to strike an innocent child?" Isabella gave a thin, mocking smile. "Don't be dramatic. Ethan, in this house, people follow rules. If you can't control your staff, I will." The words cut deeper than any blade. Ethan stepped closer, his voice low but trembling with fury. "Your staff, Maria and her daughter, aren't things you own. Isabella, they're people. People." The air turned thick, suffocating. Luna whimpered. Maria pulled her daughter close, eyes pleading. Ethan placed a gentle hand on Mariah's shoulder and said slowly, firmly, "Take your daughter and go to your room. No one will ever hurt you again." Maria gripped Luna's hand and hurried away, footsteps fading like an escape. Now only Ethan and Isabella remained, the space between them vast and cold. "What are you doing?" Isabella's voice was icy, her tone as sharp as a knife. "You're really taking her side over your wife's." Ethan's gaze darkened. "It's not about sides. It's about what's right." She laughed, a brittle, cutting sound, like shattering glass. "What's right, dumpy knave? You still live in your fantasy world morals, kindness, fairness." Her smile twisted. "You think any of that exists in this house?" He said nothing, only looked at her, a look that made her falter. "Just for a second." "Maybe I did," he murmured, "but you just proved me wrong." Isabella's lips tightened. Then she shouted, voice trembling with fury, "You'll regret this, Ethan." He nodded once, slowly. His voice was calm, heavy, terrifying in its steadiness. "Maybe I will, but if I have to regret protecting a child, I'll live with that." She glared at him, eyes blazing, then turned sharply and stormed off, the sound of her heels echoing coldly across the floor. Ethan didn't move. His body felt paralyzed, his mind spinning. The image of Isabella's hand striking Luna replayed over and over, the child's cries stabbing at his brain. He felt himself collapsing, not from exhaustion, but realization. This cruelty, it wasn't sudden. It had always been there. He had just refused to see it. He sank into the nearest chair, his hands trembling, his thoughts flooded with questions. How could she do this? How long had this been happening, and who am I for not seeing it sooner? The clock in the living room ticked slowly, each beat like a hammer against his conscience. A cool night breeze slipped through the doorframe, dimming the kitchen lights. Ethan looked up into the darkness. The house that once felt safe now felt foreign, hollow. He took a deep breath and whispered, not to anyone in particular, but to himself, "I've been asleep for far too long." Outside, rain began to fall. Droplets slid down the glass, streaking the windows like tears, as if the house itself were mourning. Ethan sat there for a long time. In his eyes, the dazed confusion faded, replaced by something colder, a spark of resolve, the light of a man finally awake. That night, Ethan didn't sleep. He sat in his study, the soft glow of the desk lamp washing over his tired face. On the table, a cup of coffee had gone cold. The clock showed nearly 2 a.m. The house was silent. Only the wind whispered through the pines, and the faint rattle of a loose window hinge broke the stillness. Ethan stared blankly at his computer screen. The blinking cursor on the empty document seemed to mock him. A billionaire, a leader, and you can't even understand the person you share your life with. The shock hadn't faded. The image of Isabella striking Luna played in his mind again and again. That slap wasn't just against a child. It struck at everything he'd ever believed in. He pressed his hand to his forehead and shut his eyes. Inside him churned a storm: anger, guilt, sorrow, and confusion. Yes, confusion that cut straight to the bone. He didn't know what was real anymore. Every smile, every charity gala, every embrace from Isabella. How much of it was truth, and how much was a flawless mask she'd built for the world to see? A faint sound broke his thoughts. Ethan looked up. Light spilled softly from a crack in the hallway door, Mariah's room. He could hear muffled sobs. Little Luna must still be awake. Ethan hesitated for a moment, then rose to his feet. The maid's door was slightly ajar. He knocked gently. "It's me, Ethan." Maria opened the door. Her eyes were red, her face still swollen from crying. Luna was asleep, clutching the same worn doll she'd held in fear hours ago. Ethan spoke quietly. "I'm sorry for what happened tonight. I didn't know." Maria shook her head quickly. "Please, sir, don't say that. It's not your fault. Mrs. Cole, sometimes she just—" Her voice trailed off, her eyes filled with fear. Ethan understood this wasn't the first time. "Maria," he said softly, "has this happened before?" She lowered her head. Silence hung heavy for a few seconds. Then she nodded. "Not often, but yes. When I make a mistake, or when Luna breaks something, she gets angry, sir. Very angry." Ethan's body went rigid. His heart thudded painfully. "Why didn't you tell me?" Maria looked up, tears shimmering. "I was afraid. I need this job. I thought if I just kept quiet, she'd calm down. I didn't want to trouble you." Ethan stood there, feeling as if someone had crushed his chest. He had lived in this very house and yet been completely blind to what went on inside it. Her words echoed in his mind. Sometimes she gets angry. Why had Isabella become this way? He remembered their early years together. Isabella full of passion, her eyes clear, her voice warm. She once said she wanted to use her fame to help the poor. But as money, power, and admiration surrounded her, she began to change. She started talking about class, status, and what people think. She wanted everything and everyone to be perfect. Ethan had ignored it until tonight. Thunder rumbled faintly in the distance. Maria flinched. Ethan gave her a reassuring look. "Tomorrow, I'll speak with Isabella. Don't worry. I won't let this happen again." Maria nodded in gratitude, though the fear in her eyes lingered. Ethan returned to his room. He didn't sleep a single minute. The morning after. By morning, the mansion gleamed under the sunlight. From the outside, nothing had changed: the garden, the lake, the sound of birds. But inside, everything felt different. Isabella sat in the dining room, perfectly dressed, makeup immaculate, as if nothing had happened. Steam curled from her cup of mint tea. When Ethan entered, she glanced up with a faint smile. "You look terrible." "Ethan, didn't sleep." He stood across from her, his gaze steady. "Do you have anything to say about last night?" She arched an eyebrow, took a slow sip of tea, and replied casually, "You're still upset about that. I already apologized." "It was nothing." "Nothing?" Ethan's voice cracked, low and raw. "You hit a child. You humiliated an innocent person. You call that nothing?" Isabella slammed the cup down. Tea splashed across the saucer. "Stop preaching to me. Ethan, you think you're better than me. You think you're some saint. Do you even know how many people suffer because of you?" Ethan froze. Her words sliced straight to his hidden guilt. She knew exactly where to strike. He'd always tried to do the right thing, yet he, too, had hurt people without realizing it. "What are you talking about?" he asked, his voice trembling. Isabella let out a cold laugh. "You love talking about social responsibility and ethics in business, don't you? But when your company laid off hundreds of employees, you still signed those papers without blinking. Don't lecture me about kindness. Ethan!" He stood speechless. For a moment, he had no defense because she was right. He had signed those papers. He had done it for the good of the company, but it had never sat right with him. The silence between them grew heavy. Then Isabella sighed, her tone turning sharp and detached. "Judge me if you want, but at least I live by the real rules of this world. The weak get crushed. The strong survive. That's all there is." Ethan looked at her for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was deep and quiet, the sound of a man letting go of something sacred. "If that's the law you live by—" Isabella then were not living in the same world anymore. She gave a small shrug, then stood up and walked away, leaving only the faint scent of her perfume drifting in the air. Ethan sat down, staring out the window. Outside, little Luna stood in the garden, holding her torn doll. She looked up at the sky eyes sad, yet somehow still pure. In that moment, Ethan understood. If he stayed silent, if he allowed this to continue, he would become part of the very darkness he despised. And deep down, he knew the truth of what was happening in this house was far from over. That afternoon, the wind over the lake was fierce and restless. Dark clouds rolled in from the Sierra Nevada range, heavy with the promise of a storm. Ethan stood in his study, staring out the window. Lake Tahoe churned below, waves crashing hard against the rocks, wild, chaotic, relentless. Inside him, the same storm raged. Since their confrontation that morning, Isabella hadn't spoken a word. She disappeared from the house, leaving behind only a short message. "Don't wait for me at dinner." Ethan didn't reply, but something inside him began to twist a growing suspicion that what he saw last night was the first time, and that maybe it wasn't the worst of it either. He turned on his computer and opened the mansion's security system. Every camera recorded 24/7 Isabella's idea from the day they built the house. The archive loaded. Rows of timestamps appeared. Ethan scrolled back a few weeks and clicked. The familiar image of the kitchen appeared, the living room, the hallway. Then he froze. There she was, Isabella, sitting in his office, alone. She opened his desk drawer, the one where he kept the company's confidential files. She pulled out a small silver hard drive and plugged it into her laptop. The glow of the screen lit her face calm, cold, calculating. Ethan's pulse pounded. That drive wasn't ordinary. It contained backup data from a secret project, one that could change the entire company, worth billions. How did she even know about it? And what was she doing with it? He clicked to the next file. Footage from Isabella's room. She was on the phone, her voice low, icy. "I've got the file. You know what it'll cost you if you don't want it on the front page?" A man's voice answered. European accented, rough. "You're clever, Isabella, but you're playing with fire." She smirked. "Fire doesn't scare me. I've lived in it my whole life." Ethan's blood ran cold. He rewound, played it again, then another clip, another call, each one cut deeper. She'd been blackmailing one of his business partners. Worse, she'd been secretly dealing with the very people Ethan had once refused to work with for being corrupt. But it didn't stop there. In an older video, Isabella sat alone with a glass of wine, speaking on the phone, her tone heavy, confessional. "You know, I once thought I could love," she said quietly. "But after that day, everything in me died. I don't feel anything anymore." A gravelly male voice replied, "You're still haunted by it." "Aren't you?" Isabella laughed bitterly. "How could I forget I killed that man not with my hands, but with my words?" Ethan went numb. The screen dimmed before his eyes. His breath caught. He replayed it again, word for word. "I killed that man with my words." The sound echoed through the room, like thunder splitting his heart in two. He opened the next file, an audio recording automatically saved by the living room security mic. Isabella's voice continued, "I was 23. I loved him, a poor journalist. He wanted to expose the corruption in the company I worked for. I begged him not to publish it, but he wouldn't listen. So I told my boss. The next morning, he was dead. They called it an accident, but I knew better. I killed him with my silence." Ethan felt the floor drop from beneath him. The air thickened cold, suffocating. Everything he'd ever believed love, trust, the image of his perfect wife shattered. He gripped the edge of the desk just to stay upright. That story Isabella once told about her lost love, who died in an accident, had been a confession all along. All the charity galas, the humanitarian speeches, they were just a mask hiding an empty soul, long since dead. Ethan stepped back, dizzy with disbelief. Outside, thunder cracked. The storm finally broke over the lake. Wind screamed through the trees, rain battering the windows. He collapsed into his chair, heart pounding out of rhythm. In his head, her voice kept repeating, "I killed him with my words." Something inside him snapped. Rain lashed the glass. Lightning flashed white. Ethan shot to his feet. He couldn't sit still. He needed answers. He needed the truth from her own mouth. He tore out of the office and down the stairs. The front door burst open. Wind howled through the foyer, whipping the curtains like ghosts. Headlights flared outside. Isabella's car had just pulled up. She stepped through the doorway, soaked in rain, surprise flickering in her eyes. "Ethan, what are you doing out here?" "It's pouring." He stared at her, trembling. "I watched the videos. Isabella, I heard everything." Her expression froze then, slowly. She dropped her purse and gave a thin smile. "So you finally know. You killed someone." Ethan's voice cracked, almost pleading. She stepped closer, voice like steel. "I didn't kill anyone. I just told the truth, and truth destroys the weak." Ethan staggered back, his eyes blazing. "You've betrayed everything, your conscience, your soul, everything I ever loved about you." "No, Ethan," she said softly, every word a blade. "You betrayed me. You chose your morals, your justice, your perfect little world, but you never chose me." A lightning flash lit her face proud. "Beautiful, terrifying," Ethan whispered. "Broken. The woman in this house, she's not Isabella anymore." She smiled faintly, her eyes hollow. "Maybe she died a long time ago." The door slammed shut in the wind. Outside, the storm howled in fury. They stood there, one man shattered by the truth, one woman swallowed by her own darkness. And Ethan knew, with a clarity sharper than fear, the storm outside wasn't the only one raging tonight. Another had begun inside him, a storm of truth, justice, and a pain beyond redemption. Thunder split the sky open, slashing the night like a wound. For an instant the mansion blazed with light, then fell back into darkness. Ethan stood motionless in the grand foyer. Rain hammered down. Wind whipped the curtains. and the drumming on the glass merged with the frantic beat of his heart. In front of him, Isabella remained where she was, almost indifferent. He gulped for air, his voice rough and ragged. "You've betrayed everything, even yourself." She shrugged, exhaustion and defiance flickering in her eyes. "Don't talk like you've never sinned." "Ethan, you betrayed me too, only you gave it a prettier name, morality." "Morality isn't betrayal," Ethan nearly shouted. "It's the only thing that keeps us from becoming as cold as you." His words echoed through the hollow space. Anger surged in him, along with a fear that the woman before him had lost whatever human warmth she had left. Then, unexpectedly, Isabella laughed, a hoarse, bitter sound edged with tears. "You think I wanted to become this," she cried. "You think I enjoy looking in the mirror and not recognizing myself." Ethan froze. For the first time, he saw her trembling. Her slight shoulders shook. When she spoke again, her voice softened. "I loved once, Ethan. I believed love could save everything. But when someone dies because of you, when one mistake turns your whole life into a nightmare, you stop believing in anything." Ethan's fury ebbed into stunned silence. You still think about him?" The journalist, Isabella, lifted her gaze, distant and unfocused. "Every night, I still see him, his eyes, right before he went over that slope." Her voice broke. "I tried to forget. I thought I could bury the guilt with parties, with spotlights, with marrying someone like you, someone who could make my past disappear." Ethan's chest tightened. In that moment, he saw not just a sinner, but a soul drowning in fear and shame. He said nothing. Outside, the rain kept lashing the window seat drop like the heartbeat of the house. Isabella's eyes drifted. "I never meant to hurt anyone again, Ethan. But when I look at Maria, at that child I see myself, the dirty, despised poverty I ran from. I hate them because they remind me of who I used to be." Ethan shut his eyes. Every word cut deeper. She wasn't only hurting others, she was punishing herself, striking at the mirrors of her past. "Isabella," he whispered, voice raw, "you need help." She let out a sour, humorless laugh. "Help what? A therapist, a priest to hear my confession." She stepped closer, eyes blazing like a drunk on truth. "You don't understand. Ethan, I don't want redemption. I want oblivion. Forgetting isn't salvation," he said, meeting her gaze. "It just lets the wound rot deeper." Lightning flashed, washing her face in white, the tracks of 2 tears lost in the rain. Maybe I died that day." "Ethan," she murmured. The house shuddered with thunder. Then the lights snapped off. Everything fell into darkness. Only their heavy breathing and the roar of the storm remained. Ethan stood there in the dark, the cold air pouring in through the open door. He knew this wasn't just weather. It was a life storm, ripping away every false layer, leaving the bare truth of who they were. He stepped closer and took Isabella by the shoulders. "Tell me what you want, right now." She was silent for a long time, then barely above a breath, "I don't know. I just know I can't go back." Ethan looked at her, and in that instant he understood. Behind all the cruelty, the lies, the armor, Isabella was still a woman lost, desperate, haunted by wounds no one had forgiven. Outside, the storm began to ease. The rain softened, but inside Ethan, another storm smoldered on. What do I do with the truth? He could turn her in, let the world judge and punish, but when he met her hollow, grief-soaked eyes, he understood there are punishments worse than prison to live without yourself. Ethan lifted his gaze to the window. where the sky had cracked open to a thin blade of light, a small tear in the blackness. Faint, but real, like the feeling in his chest, now a stubborn belief that maybe, just maybe, people never fully lose their light. The morning after. By dawn. Lake Tahoe had returned to calm. The sky was so clear, so impossibly blue. You'd never believe a storm had raged there the night before. But inside Ethan, the storm hadn't passed. It had only gone quiet like the sea after swallowing a ship. He stepped into the bathroom, turned on the tap, and splashed cold water onto his face. The shock woke him, but the man in the mirror was still a stranger. Sunken eyes, gaunt face, hair disheveled. No longer the composed billionaire the world admired. Just a man stripped bare, lost, uncertain of who he was anymore. Ethan stared into his reflection. For years, he'd lived with the comforting illusion that he was a good man, decent, moral, righteous. But now, he wasn't sure. If he was truly good, why hadn't he seen the darkness festering inside his own home? If he was truly moral, why had he turned away from the quiet cries, too afraid to face the truth? The water ran clear and cold, but his voice came out heavy, cracked. "You're no different from her," he whispered to the mirror. "You just know how to dress it up with prettier words." A sharp pain tightened in his chest. He remembered his younger days, the startup years when he'd laid off dozens of employees just to save the company's cash flow. He'd said back then, "We have to be strong to survive." Now that line echoed in his mind, identical to Isabella's from the night before. The weak are crushed, and the strong survive. So maybe they weren't so different after all. Ethan braced himself against the sink, head bowed, and for the first time, he felt a deep, cold fear, not of her, but of himself. The morning dragged on in heavy silence. Maria moved quietly through the house, cleaning as if afraid to disturb the air. Little Luna sat outside, playing with pebbles in the garden. No one spoke. Even the walls seemed to hold their breath. Ethan stepped onto the veranda. The smell of wet grass mixed with the first sunlight, but it brought him no comfort. Then he saw Luna, crouched beside the path, stacking smooth stones into the shape of a tiny house. When he approached, she looked up and smiled shyly. "Good morning, Mr. Ethan," she said softly. "Good morning, Luna. What are you building?" "A house," she replied, eyes bright. "Mama says sometimes things that fall apart can be built again, if you're patient enough." Ethan froze. That simple line from an 8-year-old hit him harder than any sermon ever could. He knelt beside her, watching the sunlight glint off the pebbles. "You're very good at this," he said gently. "This house will be even better than the old one." Luna smiled, her innocence gleaming like morning light. And in that fragile smile, Ethan found the one thing worth holding on to: purity, hope, the quiet belief that broken things could still be mended. That afternoon, he returned to his study. Isabella was there, dressed neatly, hair brushed, beauty intact, but her eyes were hollow, exhausted. "Are you leaving?" Ethan asked. "I'm going back to New York for a few days," she said evenly. "I need space." He nodded slowly. "Maybe that's for the best. But before you go, I want to ask you something." She looked up, silent. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked quietly. "All of it." She didn't answer right away. Her gaze drifted to the window, where the sunlight bled across the lake. Finally, she said, in a voice barely above a whisper, "Of course, every night. But regret doesn't change anything. It only makes you weaker." Ethan sighed. Maybe, but feeling regret means there's still a piece of your soul left. She gave a faint, sorrowful smile. Maybe you're right, but that piece is buried deep, too deep. She stood, gathering her bag. I'm going now. When you're ready to talk like an adult, you know where to find me. Then she walked away. Ethan didn't stop her. He only watched, the weight in his chest heavier than before. The door closed behind her, leaving a hush that filled the room. He sat down, looking out toward the lake. The last light of the day glimmered gold across the water. In the window's reflection, he saw himself the same face, but changed somehow. No longer the man who ran from the truth, but one who was beginning to face it. He opened his laptop. On the security feed, Maria and Luna appeared in the backyard, laughing softly as they rebuilt their pebble house. Sunlight shimmered on Luna's cheeks, tiny, unbroken sparks of hope. Ethan whispered to himself, maybe we can't change the past, but we can choose how to walk after it. The evening light stretched across his desk, touching the old wedding photo. He picked it up, stared for a long moment. Then, gently, he turned it face down, not to forget, but to begin again. Morning over Lake Tahoe was unusually clear and still. Sunlight spilled through the pines, glimmering across the water like shattered glass. Birdsong laced the air, blending with the faint aroma of freshly brewed coffee. It was hard to believe this was the same place that had witnessed a storm not just in the sky, but in the hearts of those within it. Ethan sat at the dining table, staring at the steam curling from his coffee cup. A few feet away, Maria moved quietly, preparing breakfast. Little Luna sat by the window, sketching something in her small notebook. The silence was soft now, no longer heavy, just fragile. Maria still avoided his eyes, but her fear had faded into a wary calm. Ethan knew the distance between them remained built from guilt and sorrow, but for the first time, he was ready to face it. Maria, he said gently. She stopped, turning toward him. Yes. Sir, don't call me that any more. Ethan smiled faintly, his voice low but sincere. Just call me Ethan. She blinked, uneasy. I can't, sir. Am not someone you need to fear, he said quietly, his tone steady and warm. If anyone in this house should feel ashamed, it's me. For the first time, Maria looked at him, really looked, and in her eyes flickered a small, tentative spark of trust. Ethan rose from his chair and took a few steps closer. I know what happened that night hurt you deeply. And I want to say, I'm sorry not just for what Isabella did, but for not seeing it sooner. Her voice trembled. I don't need you to apologize. I just want Luna to be safe and never have to see things like that again. Ethan nodded. Firm. You have my word. Shall never have to. He turned toward the window. The morning sun shimmered across the lake, soft, forgiving, like a quiet reminder that every beginning requires courage. A few hours later, Ethan drove into the city. The Coal Industries Tower rose over downtown Reno, glass and steel glinting in the light. Employees greeted him politely as he passed. To them, he looked as calm and composed as ever. No one could guess that inside him, a decision was hardening like steel. He entered the boardroom. Documents lay stacked across the table. The senior partners were waiting. One of them, a silver-haired man, spoke first. Ethan, we need your final answer. Project Eden is ready for approval. If you sign, our stock value doubles overnight. Ethan looked down at the file. Project Eden. The name sounded pure new paradise, but he knew what it really was, a shell game of false contracts. dirty money, and lies Isabella had once helped weave. He closed his eyes. Her words from that night echoed through him. I killed that man with my words. He drew a slow breath, opened his eyes, and said quietly but clearly, I'm not signing it. The room went silent. What did you just say? One of the partners demanded. You can't be serious. This project is our future. Ethan looked around the table, his gaze calm, almost serene. If our future is built on deceit, he said, then it's not a future I want to live in. Murmurs rose, angry and confused, but Ethan didn't waver. He pushed the file away, stood, and spoke evenly. I've let the darkness in for too long. From today, coal industry starts over, even if it means losing everything we rebuild in the light. He turned and walked out. Behind him, the boardroom was silent, stunned into stillness. That afternoon, he returned home. Maria and Luna were packing. She looked startled when he stepped in. You don't have to leave, Ethan said. But after what happened, I thought it would be better if we went, she replied softly. He shook his head. No, this is your home too if you want it to be. He paused, voice lowering. I want to help you start again. Not out of pity, but because I owe you that much. Maria stood still, tears gathering in her eyes. Luna clutched her old teddy bear, watching them both with quiet curiosity. Thank you, Ethan, Maria whispered. I don't know what else to say. He smiled faintly, waving it off. Just live well. That's all I ask. By late afternoon, sunlight spilled through the back porch. The lake shimmered gold, and a soft wind carried the scent of pine and wet earth. For the first time in years, Ethan felt something close to peace, even with the ache still inside him. Because now, he no longer feared it. He finally understood truth doesn't destroy people. Only running from it does, in the distance. Luna laughed a pure, bright sound that danced across the water. Ethan looked toward her and smiled. The dawn of a new life had begun quiet, humble, but bright enough to light the way forward. 3 weeks had passed since Isabella left. The mansion by Lake Tahoe breathed differently now. No more arguments echoing through the halls. No more footsteps pacing down the staircase at midnight. Only laughter, Luna's bright laughter, the smell of warm bread each morning, and the soft hum of Mariah's guitar as she washed the dishes. Ethan had learned something simple yet profound. Peace doesn't come from the absence of storms, but from learning how to live after they've passed. That morning, sunlight poured across the lake in a gentle shimmer. Ethan stepped out onto the porch. Luna was sitting on the steps, sketchbook in hand. She looked up, smiling from ear to ear. Mr. Ethan, I drew something for you. He leaned down. On the page was a small house by the lake, a man with silver hair smiling beside a woman and a little girl. Above them, written in wobbly handwriting, were the words, Home is where kindness lives. Ethan smiled, warmth flooding through his chest. He rested a hand on her hair and said softly, Thank you. Luna, you know, that drawing is worth more than anything I've ever bought. The girl giggled. From a distance, Maria watched them. Her lips curved in a quiet smile, though her eyes still carried a trace of caution, the kind that lingers after deep wounds. Ethan understood. He didn't try to bridge the gap with words. He simply let time do what it always does. Let the water settle. Let the ripples fade. That afternoon, a letter arrived. The envelope was plain, but the name in the corner froze him where he stood, Isabella Cole. He held it for a long moment before opening it. Inside was a single handwritten note. The handwriting, elegant yet trembling, was unmistakable. Ethan, by the time you read this, I've probably left the country. I'm not running away. I just need to go somewhere no one knows my name, to live like an ordinary person, or at least try to learn how. I was wrong, in more ways than I can count. I don't expect forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that night, when you looked at me with that pain in your eyes, I realized something. I wasn't afraid of losing you. I was afraid of losing the part of myself you once saw. I met Father Thomas at the old church. He said that sometimes God doesn't ask who's right or wrong, he only asks, what have you learned from your mistakes? I don't know if I can ever make things right, but I'll try, in my own way. Thank you for not destroying me, when you had every reason to. Isabella. By the time he reached the last line, Ethan's vision blurred, not from love, but from compassion, a quiet sorrow that carried no anger, no bitterness. He folded the letter carefully and looked out across the lake. The water shimmered under the late-day sun, radiant, still, forgiving. Somewhere inside him, a door finally closed, softly, without regret. That evening, Maria brought 2 cups of tea to the porch. You still can't sleep, she asked gently. Ethan smiled faintly. Maybe I'm just not used to the silence yet. It's unsettling in its own way. Maria nodded. Silence can be peace too if we let ourselves listen to it. Their eyes met no fear this time, only understanding. 2 people who had been broken in different ways, finally seeing one another without pretense. They sat together without speaking. The night breeze whispered through the pines. Crickets sang under the eaves, and the warmth of the tea lingered between them, fragile, human enough. For the first time, Ethan felt a deep and steady calm, the kind that didn't demand anything, didn't promise anything. It simply was. The next day, he went to Luna's school. She was performing a small song for parents, "You Are My Sunshine." As her voice floated through the hall, pure, unshaken, full of light, Ethan felt something stir inside his chest. For the first time in years, his heart moved to the rhythm of hope. Maria stood beside him, her eyes bright. When Luna reached the final line, she waved from the stage, "Mr. Ethan. See." I didn't forget the words. He laughed and gave her a thumbs up. In that instant, he understood redemption doesn't always come from grand gestures. Sometimes, it's simply choosing to stay, to be kind, to do good, one small thing at a time. That night, Ethan stood before the mirror upstairs. The man staring back was older, yes, but softer, steadier. The lost look was gone, replaced by something quiet and certain. He spoke aloud, almost a whisper to himself. No one's perfect, but we can choose to be better a little each day. He turned off the light. Darkness filled the room, gentle and complete. Outside, dawn was beginning to break. A silver ribbon of sunlight touched the lake, thin, fragile, but real. Ethan stood by the window, eyes closed, a faint smile on his lips. He needed nothing more, because sometimes the final light does come from the sky. It comes from within. In life, none of us are perfect. Each of us carries mistakes, shadows we're often too afraid to face. But what truly matters in the fall, it's how we choose to rise again. The story of Ethan Cole, a man who seemed to have everything, reminds us that wealth, fame, and power can never hide the truth, nor replace compassion. When his world collapsed, the only thing that saved him wasn't strength or pride but kindness. Ethan chose forgiveness over hatred, light over darkness, and in doing so, he didn't just heal from pain, he found his humanity again. We will all face our own storms, moments when faith is tested, love is wounded, and goodness feels lost. But if we can still hold on to a little compassion, a little grace, then hope remains. Because in the end, the light we seek doesn't come from the world around us. It begins within our own hearts. If you too believe that kindness can heal, share this story, like, share, and subscribe to help this message reach more souls. Stories of truth, of humanity, and the quiet strength of hope. Thank you for staying till the end, because only hearts that truly listen can feel the miracles hidden in the simplest things.